Well, what's up again there, guys? Brian here at 3TR, and I have a massive top list video to share with you guys today that a good number of people have been asking me to do for a couple of years now. Now, during my Season 2 Versus Series matchup, which was Sephiroth versus Virgil from Devil May Cry, I stated in that video that in all of Final Fantasy, there are only 5 characters that I think could actually be the biggest challenges for Sephiroth. I believe that 2 would really give Sephiroth a really difficult time, and only 3 characters could actually take Sephiroth down by themselves. And so this is that video in which I'm going to discuss. Now, again, I would just like to give you guys a couple of reminders. We are only dealing with characters from Final Fantasies 1 to 12 because that's what I stated at the time of that video's recording. Now, I will admit that since then there are a couple of characters that I would have added on this list had I involved all of the Final Fantasy games that have come out since then, but we're going to keep it strictly 1 to 12. So, with that said, let's jump right into the first character, number 5 on my list, and that happens to be...
Number 5 on my list is Soldier First Class Zack Fair. Out of anyone on this list, Zack was placed in the best position to be able to contend with Sephiroth. Physically, he certainly was within Sephiroth's range of performance, being only slightly behind. Skill-wise, being mentored by Angio Hewley, it placed him in a very good position to learn from one of the few individuals that Sephiroth respected and openly acknowledged him as a great warrior. And Zack was able to take down Genesis, who, on his best day when he's not holding back, could present a legitimate threat to Sephiroth. And Zack was also granted the opportunity to actually train against multiple simulations of Sephiroth for years, which gave him more prep time than anyone on this list. Where Zack lacked the most was with his tactics, because even with all these benefits working in his favor, he could only just barely hold his own for a very short period of time. Like the old saying goes, when it comes to combat, you could spend hundreds of hours training for it, but it never really prepares you for the real thing, and Zack is the perfect example of this statement. But even from my judgment, I feel he should have performed better. Now, Zack did manage to survive an engagement with Sephiroth, and when compared to the mass majority of protagonist characters, that in itself is an achievement, because for most, not only would they not last as long as Zack did, there was no chance in hell that they would walk away alive. So while Zack is one of the lucky ones, when compared to everyone else on this list, when you take into effect all the advantage that he had at his disposal, there is just no excuse that with plenty of prep time given to him, that when he faced Sephiroth, he should have performed much better. But still, he would perform better than most, which is why I have to give him the number 5 spot on this list. Number 4 on my list is my personal favorite Final Fantasy character of all time, Auron from Final Fantasy X. Out of anyone on this list, he is the only one whose reputation matches Sephiroth's. Just as Sephiroth is regarded as the greatest soldier, Auron is openly recognized as the greatest guardian Spear had ever seen. And if we are talking skill sets as swordsmen, then they are on complete opposites of the spectrum. Because while Sephiroth is the unquestionable greatest speed fencer in the franchise, Auron is the greatest power duelist in the entire franchise, even more so than Advent Children Cloud. In some aspects of a swordsman, Auron is actually Sephiroth's superior in terms of experience and discipline. Being much older and still well into his prime as a combatant, apart from anyone on this list, he is the only combatant who would refuse to allow Sephiroth to dictate how this fight would play out. In times where Sephiroth is experiencing any levels of difficulty, his plan is to break off and play a game of cat and mouse, forcing the opponent to come after him, but Auron would refuse this, knowing exactly what Sephiroth is planning, and making the statement that if Sephiroth wants to win, he's going to have to fight Auron on his level, which is something that Sephiroth has never had to do before. And with both combatants more than likely refusing to use magic, this would be a pure sword battle with 2 of the greatest going at it. And despite what some may believe, Auron's defenses are significant enough to deal with Sephiroth's fury-like offense, and his physical strength is enough to challenge him. But where Auron falls short is with his stamina. Even with Auron being in such great shape, if he did everything right, Sephiroth would eventually tire him out. If Sephiroth could exhaust someone like Advent Children Cloud, who is in some physical departments Sephiroth's superior, then there is no question that he would tire Auron out. A perfect representation of how this fight will play out would be the Mustafar duel between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker in Revenge of the Sith, but with the opposite outcome. To be honest, if we were to grant Oren any quality of Genova cells, then he would certainly win, which is what grants him the number 4 spot on my list. Number 3 on my list, and the first person who I believe could certainly bring down Sephiroth, as he's proven it on multiple occasions, is of course Cloud Strife at the time of Advent Children. Now, as a physical combatant, Cloud actually has the advantage over Sephiroth in terms of strength and durability. Cloud also has the advantage of having a far greater tactical mind than, say, someone like Zack Fair, who even with all those training sessions just never could quite get Sephiroth's maneuvers down. But not only did Cloud fix and improve upon the fighting style that he copied from Zack, he actually took it a step further and incorporated elements of Sephiroth's fighting techniques into his own, which is something surprisingly no one before him had ever attempted to try. Cloud also benefits from the fact that Sephiroth's unwillingness to use magical abilities when his maneuvers puts him at somewhat of a disadvantage, which is something Cloud is more than willing to do. But he also can take advantage of Sephiroth's own arrogance and his lack of a reaction time to a new technique or maneuver, which is exactly what led to Sephiroth being put down once and for all. At the end of the day, Cloud was placed in the perfect position to develop as a combatant and take advantage of all Sephiroth's weaknesses as a fighter, and even if Cloud makes mistakes and gets knocked down, he is more than prepared to bounce back and do what is needed to be done to take Sephiroth down, and that's what granted him the number 3 spot on my list. Number 2 on my list has to go to Cecil Harvey from Final Fantasy IV, who in my opinion is really the most balanced combatant to take down Sephiroth in a sense that he has a balanced mixture of swordsmanship and a wide variety of magical abilities to catch Sephiroth off guard. While serving under the King of Baron, Cecil developed himself into one of the kingdom's greatest warriors, and even was granted command of the Red Wings, which, as a combatant, not only guarantees him a high level of skills as a swordsman, but grants him a sophisticated mind for combative tactics. While I do not believe that he is Sephiroth's equal physically, or as good of a swordsman, he is at least able to contend with him for a good amount of time, and perhaps not nearly as long as someone like Orin or Cloud, but he doesn't need to, because his wide collection of magical abilities can make up for what he lacks in that department, and his ability to wield the powers of both a Dark Knight and a Paladin, which, for those of you who do not know or are aware of this, in Final Fantasy IV, while at some point he does lose the powers of the Dark Knight when he transfers to a Paladin, later on in the game he does gain access and the means to perform the Dark Knight ability, so being able to control both sides expertly is something that would allow him to grant the edge over someone like Sephiroth, because similar to someone like Virgil, once Cecil starts to fight him in, say, his Dark Knight form, he will throw everything he has at Sephiroth to get him comfortable, and just when Sephiroth least expects it, Cecil will immediately transform, quickly changing into his Paladin form, catching Sephiroth off guard, not giving him time to react. And with Sephiroth's weakness of not being able to respond quickly to new techniques playing a factor, Cecil, with the combination of different swordsman styles and different magical abilities, would allow him to walk away the victor over Sephiroth, which is why he gets the number 2 spot on my list. Number 1 on my list is going to surprise a lot of you, because to me, the one protagonist who can not only defeat Sephiroth, but totally dominate him is someone you wouldn't expect, and that just so happens to be Terra from Final Fantasy VI. The one thing that Terra can do that no one on this list can do is take advantage of Sephiroth's own arrogance and turn this fight from a battle of swords to a battle of magic, and that is the one form of combat that Sephiroth is seriously lacking in. In the world of Final Fantasy VII, even without his transformation into a safer mode, Sephiroth is already the most powerful user of magic. But once you venture outside of Final Fantasy VII, you're going to find a lot of people who are simply more powerful than him in that department, and Terra is one of them. Her magical defenses and barriers are more than strong enough, in my opinion, to deal with Sephiroth's sword, and if Terra enters her trance form, it's game over for him. If anything, a fight between Terra and Sephiroth would play out exactly like my Terra vs. Genesis match. Sephiroth would make the same mistake of underestimating Terra and would probably toy with her with his sword attacks. Not wanting to waste any more time, he would actually fire off a magical spell thinking that Terra was nothing but a weak little girl, and then Terra would catch him completely off guard as she completely overrides Sephiroth's attacks and then decides to go on the offense herself, catching Sephiroth completely off guard, revealing that she is a lot more powerful than she appears. The main difference between Genesis and Sephiroth is that Sephiroth, being so much more powerful than Genesis, would be able to put up more of a fight than Genesis ever could. And while he wouldn't go down immediately, once Terra enters her trance form, his defeat is practically inevitable. A perfect representation of this fight would be the very first fight between Goku and Frieza in Dragon Ball Z. Sephiroth and Frieza's smartest moves would have been to go all out from the very beginning, and had they done that, then there's no question that Terra would be cut down and Goku would have been killed. But once they had allowed the momentum to shift in the form of Terra entering her trance form and Goku going into Super Saiyan, while Sephiroth and Frieza would be able to put up a good fight, both would be blown away into oblivion. So the fact that Terra alone, within the first 12 Final Fantasy games, can defeat Sephiroth in a manner that no one else can, places her in a class all by herself, which is why, for me, she is more than deserving of taking the #1 spot on characters who can take Sephiroth down.
And that concludes my list of the top 5 best characters that I think can actually fight Sephiroth. Now, I would like to know, what do you guys think of my list? And to be honest, who do you think could take down Sephiroth? From everything I've discussed and knowing exactly what it takes to take Sephiroth down, who in Final Fantasy, in terms of protagonists, do you guys think could actually take him down? Because I know there's plenty of antagonists that could easily wipe Sephiroth out, and I know that there's a couple of OP characters that I refuse to acknowledge that probably could beat him too. But in terms of just protagonists only, who do you think could get the job done? So share your list with me and everyone else in the comments down below, and please share your thoughts on my particular list also. If you like this video, feel free to also like this video and subscribe to keep track of me in my future videos. And don't forget to press the links in the description down below to follow me on Twitter and friend me on Facebook to keep track of me in my future projects. And if you have any really great ideas that you would make for an awesome top list video, also share those ideas with me in the comments down below as well. So with that said, I'd like to thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I'll see you next time.